I'm already messing up the video, guys. Just like every other week. We are off to a good start. Welcome to Dynasty Saturday Night 5. We're the Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast of the Going for Two Live Network. Please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review if you're listening on the Going for Two audio podcast feed. If you're watching here on the YouTubes or Twitch or Kick or wherever else you are watching, please make sure you do all those other video things that feed the algorithm monster similarly. So, like, subscribe, comment, bell for notifications, all that jazz. I'm Brian Ford here with my co-host, as always, Josh Walker, donned with his Braves jersey and having moved the futon. How are you doing?
Good. We actually, when we first moved to Virginia, our couch wouldn't fit through the door because it was too wide of a couch and the banister was right there. So we were having to use an old futon. So we finally got the couch in. So yeah, I had to do some moving around. So I'm a little late, but thanks for having me on here. I'm not too happy about the Braves. Spencer Strider, their best player, is going to have Tommy John surgery. So he's going to be out for a year and a half. Besides that, I'm good. I'm happy to talk another mock.
Cool. Right on. Yeah. Today we're going to be talking about our second rookie mock draft. But as you saw in the episode title, we'll also be covering some other things. So just in general, besides the list of 5 things you're going to work with later on, that's how things work. We do a list of 5 here, Dynasty Saturday Night 5, fun stuff. It's just a vehicle for how we want to talk about the Dynasty topic that night. So other than the 5 topics, you're going to 5 items that you're going to bring up later. General thoughts at all on the mock?
Since we've been doing a lot of mocks and we've been doing it for a while since the combine, nothing too crazy happened. You kind of get a good idea where people are going to get penciled in just based off all of these, and nothing too crazy is happening. You got certain running backs that are going to be gone by the second. Certain wide receivers, middle of the second, are going to be there. So I'm kind of ready for the draft so we can shake things up and just see what all changes.
Yeah, for sure. So before we dive into other stuff, let's get paying the bills out of the way here. The show is brought to you by Underdog. Fantasy Underdog has it all, including best ball, pick'ems, DFS. We have other major sports besides football. There's baseball, golf. Are those sports? Is basketball a sport? I don't know. They even have the freaking UFL on there for you spring football degens. Anyway, if you go to underdog.com or the Underdog app and use the promo code GF2, if you are a new account, Josh Norris from Underdog himself will match up to $100 of your first deposit as a new account. So if you deposit $2, you get $2 from Josh. If you deposit 101 or more, you only get the 100 from Josh. So keep that in mind as you're joining Underdog. Go to underdog.com, go to Underdog app, use promo code GF2, get your $100 deposit match, start playing, maybe even start winning. I know I've been, scratching the itch with some big board drafts lately. So yeah, go for it. All right. So before we get into the thoughts on the mock, I wanted to talk about a couple things at the top of the show that maybe are a little more important than fantasy football. So how am I going to start? So like the first part of this, people are probably going to think that I'm mean, that I'm the asshole, right? That AITA, right? I'm gonna come off like the bad guy, right? For sure. But hang on for the second part. So we were doing this mock for the show, and Jamie, who's in the chat, one of the GF2 family, picked Malik Neighbors 101. Now, he has Neighbors above Marvin Harrison, which, while I disagree with, I don't think is nuts. What set me off though was something different, right? If you have the 101 and you're in a mock where there's no trades, you are not picking Malik Neighbors. You're either picking Caleb Williams or Marvin Harrison, right? That's based on the value. Those are the only two acceptable 101 picks in any mock. Anything else is just stupid. It's just like you're purposely trying to be cute and be an agent of chaos and be funny, right? And what got me was it was not just being defended as that whole, Jamie shtick, right? Roshan and, having fun with mispronouncing Zach Kuntz's name and, neighbors over everyone and that sort of thing. It was being defended as a logical pick, right? As a good fantasy football pick at 101. And that got under my skin. Yes, first round quarterbacks have a high bust rate. We all know that quarterback is as close to a crapshoot as we have in any position in fantasy football. I acknowledge as much in my Drake May article, which just dropped yesterday. Go goingfor2.com and read it. But you either swing for the ceiling of a 101 like Caleb in a super flex, or you take the closest thing to a can't miss in Marvin Harrison, right? There's no reason to take Malik Neighbors at the 101, right? It's just simply not a good pick to make. It's an illogical fantasy football pick. I would not take much fantasy advice from somebody who thought Malik Neighbors was a legitimate 101 pick, right? Mock drafts for shows like this, right, are useful to the extent they're credible. And they're credible to the extent that people know what the heck they're doing, and therefore they're plausible, right? And the plausibility of a mock draft, because, this may happen in your league, right, is especially important the earlier you are in the draft, right? Personally speaking, if I saw a mock draft up on a screen, which we're about to do, and Malik Neighbors was 101, I don't know that I would continue watching, right? Personally speaking, if Caleb and Marvin weren't the top two picks, I'd wonder what the heck the mockers were doing. Personally speaking, if the top seven weren't the same top seven that we're all talking about, I would be kind of, what, really? Who's in that mock, right? I mean, there's a huge difference between picking Malik Neighbors 101 versus Caleb and Marvin than there is in the mid-second if you're taking Trey Benson over some wide receiver. I don't care much then, right? The plausibility is the most important the earlier in the draft, right? So my reaction when Malik Neighbors went 101 is mock's ruined. I don't want to use it, right? I went straight to anger. And people were saying in the chat, oh, why don't you just use ADP? And it's like misses the point completely, entirely about this, right? That's a dumb argument for something like this. Why don't you just use ADP and be a robot? No, that there's a huge difference between just use ADP and be a robot and be chalk and fuckery with this kind of stuff. Right? So I am substantively 100% correct about that. I believe that, no doubt, right? The question then becomes, what do I do with the anger it produced, and why did it produce anger? I took it personally. And when, again, Jamie in the chat, I've heard Neighbors over MHJ. I'm going for 2 with John Lobb. That doesn't matter. You don't take him 101. Even if you think that. In a mock, there's no trades. If you were in a dynasty league and had the 101, you would not take Malik Neighbors. You trade back. Otherwise, you're doing it wrong. And I never say something absolutist, like you're doing it wrong. And you know what? I'm going to close the chat because I don't want to. Right. So I took it personally. And the reason people like me take things like that personally is because it shows up as something I wouldn't do that to them. This is for content. This is for us to use on a show, on a podcast, right? And I took it personally. I was hurt by it. Like you're fucking with my mock. Like what are you doing? If I had a friend who was doing a mock for a show and I had the 101, even if I thought Malik Neighbors was the greatest player that had ever lived, there's no way I would take him 101 for my friend's mock because I know that friend has to go use it on a show, has to put it on a screen, has to deal with people in the chat and defend me, right? Because whatever, right? And that's why I reacted the way that I did, you know. And I went to go record a podcast right in the middle of that, just like, okay, I'll leave this aside. I'm gonna go record, you know. And Jesse could tell I was annoyed, and he knew exactly why I was annoyed because I sent him the link to that mock to invite him, and you know, and he didn't make it in time, but he saw Malik Neighbors go 101, and he knew exactly why I was annoyed because he knew it was dumb. He goes, "Come on, you're trying to make content, right?" And Jamie didn't take Neighbors higher than Neighbors, quote unquote, should be taking in a mock where it was for the website's ADP. So it's for the website's ADP, we won't be a clown. But if it's for my show, we're a clown. And I know that intent is not to hurt me personally, right? I know that, which is one of the reasons why I'm sitting in this chair and not skipping the show. But impact for me matters. And that's where I'm going to try to transition this into sort of the theme of mental health and autism acceptance. I'm autistic. I have ADHD. I have a whole list of acronyms with mental health issues, right? And a lot of times, folks like us, we take things like that personally. We tend to have what comes off to some people as thin skin and being quote unquote soft as baby shit, you know, when really it's a sensitivity to what's right and wrong, right? Some people call this like justice sensitivity. I think that's okay. I use that. We do have justice sensitivity. Unfair things will cause anger and emotions in us that may come from small situations like a mock draft, but the feelings are similar to bigger situations like the political stuff I'm involved in, you know? And that's just the way my brain is wired. I can't do much about that wiring and that initial reaction, right? And sometimes people who, when they talk about justice sensitivity, it ends up being, you know, white neurodivergent people talking about their version of what social justice is and that sort of thing. And so it's really a sensitivity to what my personal sense of justice is, right? My personal sense of fairness is, right? And that's why it sparked that reaction in me. And another reason, you know, is that there are things attached to a lot of those conditions that aren't necessarily like official disorders or whatever, so to speak, even though I hate that word disorder. But, you know, things that now collectively in the culture and in the community of neurodivergent content creators and, you know, social media and that sort of thing, we're realizing some of these like sub factors like betrayal trauma and, you know, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, you know, things that are in place. You know, it's not Jamie's fault, right? That my friends when I was 12 betrayed me and abandoned me for no apparent reason other than they just decided, you know, as we're, you know, in the tender age of middle school and trying to be cool, that I wasn't cool enough and I was weird. And so they rode their bikes away from me as a prank. And, you know, right. That's not Jamie's fault. But it's there. And the other reason my skin was thin and the trigger was a hair trigger was my life is a tornado right now, right? And all the background stuff that I was just talking about, autism, ADHD, the mental health conditions, right? I'm in the middle of a job search because I resigned from my job, partly because I stuck, well, not even partly, largely because I stuck to my political principles. Right? So I'm in the middle of a job search. I have no idea what I'm going to do for money, right? It's my resignation kicks in June. Like I have till June to figure that out, right? It's probably going to, I'm also in the middle of a housing search because I'm probably going to be making a lot less money because I left that job because I stuck to my political purposes. But the housing is contingent on the job. So searching for both at once is kind of weird and difficult, right? Also, I don't want to say this in such detail publicly because I don't know that, he would want me to do something that specific, but there's my brother, family member of mine, my brother is ill and ill in a way that can be significant and that I'm going to have to stay close to around here, which also sort of feeds into the job and the housing search, right? And so my life right now is several jigsaw puzzles with the pieces all thrown into one pile from all the puzzles. And there's no pictures in the box, right? And I have to endure that and go through that and climb that and ski uphill, push that boulder up, run the obstacle course with the brain that I have inside my head, which is another tax that I pay. And so when I come to a mock draft, it's supposed to be my fun, easy escape, right? But we also know that fun, easy escapes aren't always like completely safe spaces for us either, right? Like there's going to be conflict, right? So the question for me became, how do I deal with this, right? I've got this anger inside me. I've got this hurt and this betrayal inside me, right? And to me, emotions like that, anger, betrayal, hurt, right? They're neither positive nor negative. They are what they are. They're like the weather, sort of, and they're temporary, It's what we do with them, I think, that matters most, And I think it's easy to kind of say, oh, well, it's just one pick in a mock draft. You switch 1 and 2, and you're good. And to a degree, that's right. And we're about to put it up on the screen soon. And again, that's why I'm kind of in this chair and kind of riding with it and not, in the corner sulking. Right? I mean, I have to have perspective, and not perspective in the simple way. Like even what I say, like, oh, these guys are 22-year-old kids and they're looking for, their career and they're full of dreams, and we're sitting here saying, they're not shifty enough for the pixels in our sleeper app. It's not about that, right? Because I'm going to get canceled for this. Any millennial woman with a rose quartz, rose gold phone case and a positive vibes only sign on their wall and live, laugh, love, right? Lululemon can tell you about perspective and you got priority. And that doesn't apply always to my brain the way that it does to others, right? Anger can be useful. It can be very powerful. It can get things done. Society needs folks like neurodivergent folks. We're programmed for when the twig breaks in the woods and during the night shift, and we're there to protect the homies. One of my favorite Clash songs, right? The Clampdown, right? Let fury run the hour. Anger can be power if you know that you can use it. But at the same time, is this a place where anger can be useful? No, it wasn't, right? It wasn't. And what I needed was not perspective. I mean, obviously, I know the pixels in the sleeper app don't friggin' matter, and it's just a rookie mock draft, and it's just fantasy football, right? And like, who cares what I put on the screen and what people say in the chat? The hell do I care? I've been making fantasy football content since 2020, but really in earnest since 2021. And I've grossed less than $100. I'm not doing it for the money or for clout. I really care about what we put up on that screen. Right. Although, now that I'm leaving my teaching job where I was, very comfortable and had health insurance, I may need to start making some money in fantasy football. Right? But I care. I care about what we put on the screen. I care about putting out a good product. I care about credibility and plausibility, Yes, we're here to have fun, right? But so anyway, what I needed was not perspective and priorities. What I needed was distance, right? I needed to not have my face planted up against the tree, unable to see the forest. And it's not easy to do, and there's no secret magic formula for that, right? And I don't do it perfectly all the time. This time I was able to do it, I'm not gonna lie, I took a wee little bong hit after I recorded the podcast with Jesse, right? And walked the dogs before that, got some fresh air. And then I said, no, we're gonna use it. And we're gonna use it for this. We're gonna talk about mental health, and we're gonna talk about Autism Acceptance Month. You may see it elsewhere as Autism Awareness Month. Some of us, I don't speak for everybody ever in the community, but some of us in the community don't like the word awareness because it's kind of like a disease month, like Cancer Awareness Month and that sort of thing. We're not a disease, right? What we need is acceptance and understanding. What we need is for the world to try to at least meet us halfway at minimum, and we can work with that, right? And so when processing the anger for me, right, it was walking back and saying, I know this is an example of a stimulus and a response, a feeling, an emotion, and an action, right? I know why this is happening because I know why my brain works a certain way, and that's what's happening right now. That's why I'm having the same reaction to a mock draft, fairness and betrayal that I would to, the political issues that I am involved in. Right? It's the same physical feeling inside me, right? And not everybody has the luxury of being able to step back because we live in a society where people don't have access to diagnosis, information, to the care, right? Not to mention I'm a white cis hetero guy, and so I have all the advantages in every system, even if they're not always visible, right? Including this mental health system. And so I had to work through that and think about how my brain works, and think about what the right action to do with this is. I had messaged you and I said, we're not going to use a mock. I'm open to being talked out of it, but I'm really annoyed. And like, I just want to, and I took the wee little bomb hit. I had the fresh air before it. I thought about, okay, this is a pattern in my brain. This is a pattern in my life where there are landmines out that people don't know about and they step on them, and they're responsible for the stepping, but I'm at least partially responsible for the explosion. And I got to a point and I got enough distance and space and time, which again, people don't always get from these things, to then go ahead and say we're going to use it, and this is not, the positive vibes only and the live, laugh, love. It's more like what Cecil Lammey from Football Guys says when he says stay frosty at the end of podcasts. He's not saying don't get angry. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be right. I believe I am 1,000% substantively right and correct on this topic. It's about staying frosty with it, right? It's about having perspective. It's about you're going to get angry. Stuff will make you angry, especially if you're somebody like me, right? It's about moving through a world that doesn't accept that anger at little things as quote unquote normal and coping with it, right? And the burden of all that is on the people with the mental health issues and folks like me who are autistic, right? And so I wanted to mention that. I wanted to talk about Autism Acceptance Month, that you may have people in your life, you know, who are neurodivergent in all sorts of ways, autistic, ADHD, BPD, OCD, CPSD, all of them, right? And they may be carrying things, right? What they need from folks is grace and space, right? And understanding. And we need to move towards a world that we live in community like that, where we give each other that grace, that space, that understanding. You know, it's very trite, the whole we're all carrying everything, like the guy who cuts you off on the road, you know, we don't know what's going on in his life, you know. But you know, sometimes when your friends and family members have a brain that's wired a certain way. And so, you know, keep that in mind when things like this come up. And just know that for a lot of us, you know, like for example, our brains process 40% more information each day. For a lot of us, myself included, existing is exhausting. So when we pop off in a mock draft chat, I'm not saying that, you know, it's the pillar of serenity and that I shouldn't be accountable for things that I do or say, you know, but I am saying that we should try to give folks space and grace and understanding, especially when we know they might have a spicy brain like mine. That's all I have to say. The rest of the show, we're going to do what we want to do, unless you want to say something.
No, I do want to say thank you for being vulnerable. That's not easy to do. I've never really been able to come out and talk about stuff like that. So I do admire that, and I do appreciate you being vulnerable for everybody. Because everything you said there at the end is very true. People just need grace in this world. I do it all the time. I don't think about what other people are going through. I jump to conclusions. I think they're an asshole. You know, there's a lot more to it than that. And I think people just need to stop and take a step back and really look at stuff like that. So I love that you said all this. I appreciate you. I love you as a friend. You're not an asshole. This just how your brain is. You can't help that. Well, I mean, you are an asshole, but not for this. So,
all right, let's put.
No, I think this is important, and I support this 100%.
All right, right on. All right, let's put the mock draft up on the screen here and get going with our list of fives. I don't know how large that is for folks watching live, because you know it centers in the screen and gets smaller, and then you know, me and Josh have our little squares on the side there and stuff. So I don't know if does this make it bigger? That's what she said. No, okay.
Not for me at least.
All right. Do you want to be below? Do you want to be on the side? Let's be on the side. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So takeaway number one, Josh. So what we did tonight was my brain was elsewhere and I'm fucking exhausted and I hit a wall and I'm burnt out this week. And so I just said, listen, I'll handle the stuff at the top of the show because I wanted to talk about it. But, you know, but we'll do, you know, Josh does a list and we'll just riff rather than both of us having a list. Also because I just took up a lot of space and time. So, all right, Josh, what's your first takeaway from Mock Draft 2.0?
So I just framed this kind of like we did last time. I did a biggest reach, best value, best overall draft, and worst draft. And I'm gonna start doing best value, and that's who I think went. Obviously got picked the latest, and I think could have the most upside. And I'm going to show Jamie some love. I'm going to talk about neighbors later, but I'm going to show Jamie a little love here. I like his Bucky Irving pick at the 401. I still have Bucky as like top 6 in my running backs. He didn't test as well as everyone thought he would, but the game tape and watching his contact balance, all that, I think he's going to be a lot better than he tested. 40 speed doesn't matter as much to me, and game speed, he has it. He has the quickness. Landing spot will matter, but early 4th round, I think that's an absolute steal. I'd be willing to take him early 3rd, middle of the 3rd, and getting him there, I think, is a really good pick there. So I'm going to give Jamie some love and say the Bucky Irvings is the best value pick I saw here.
Yeah, I agree. I actually, toward the end of the 3rd, I went a little bit off my board and took Sanat instead of Bucky, just because I wanted to make sure I got Sanat in case we were going to talk about, because he's been getting some steam actually, like not just with us in fantasy, but there are reports that the NFL is starting to say, oh yeah, he's the second best tight end in the draft. But anyway, I love Bucky. I have him in that second bucket of running backs after the testing, simply because I think that testing will lower him on some teams' draft boards and will narrow his path to success. And so I think, therefore, his likelihood of hitting his ceiling outcome or likelihood of getting the type of touches we need outside of just being a pass catcher may not be there. But I want to shout out Dynasty Zoltan. Much respect. Still has Bucky as his RB1. He's like, I don't care about the testing. I see what I see on the field. He had a great stat, actually. I wish I knew you were going to talk about Bucky, about there's been since whatever year, 4 or 5 backs that have so-and-so missed tackles forced, so-and-so explosive plays, etc. And it's a list of really great guy like Bijan Gibbs, whatever, Saquon Barkley, and Bucky Irving, right? So I think the testing kind of reveals that some of his success was dependent on being in the Pac-12. But either way, I'm a Bucky supporter, and yeah, grabbing him at the 401 is delicious as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of I see that kind of being similar as me and Estime. I moved him down 1 spot, maybe 2, but at the same time, I still know what I saw on the tape. I watched all the Notre Dame games. He was the best player on the field most of the time, so you just got to stick to that.
And what is your second point?
All right, let's go with biggest reach. I'm gonna say Spencer Rattler going to Jay Goody 77 there. I have Pratt, who you can get in the 4th, sometimes 5th rounds. I'd rather have him instead of Rattler. He made some really good throws in college, but I think he kind of falls into that thing of he's a really good college quarterback, but won't translate to the NFL. I think he'll make too many mistakes, try and do too much. So I think it's just more of me just being completely off Spencer Rattler. I'm not going to draft him in any of my rookie drafts, even if in a 5-rounder. So I think that's a pretty obvious pick there. And also honorable mention Penix 112. But in his defense, he seems to be getting some buzz with NFL teams, so that might push up his draft capital and give him a shot, which makes him, draftable there. So
yeah, I think I would agree. I'm kind of off Penix, especially at cost. I don't think he's a first-round talent. In fact, I'm starting to think that some of this is lying season, right? So we don't know. Is the JJ McCarthy scheme actually real, right? Do teams really like Penix as a first-round talent? We're gonna find out. If he goes in the first round to the Raiders or something, and I have 110 or something like that, I'm going to trade out. I'm going to trade across to 2025 and scoop up another pick along with that 2025 first. And you can go, not you, but someone else can go ahead and take Michael Penix, right? Quarterback's a crapshoot, right? So if that's a crapshoot or as close to a crapshoot as we have, right? You just say, okay, I'm going to, trust what I think about those guys and enter the crapshoot with that. With Rattler, I do hear again, lying season, that the NFL is keen on him and is going to get drafted higher. You and I both like Pratt more. I got Pratt at the 410. If Rattler goes to say the Bucks, right? His comp is very frequently Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield really only has 2 years of guaranteed quarterback money there. Or he goes to I don't know, the Saints, right? Where Derek Carr, as much as he's got guaranteed money there, isn't very good. And we don't know how long he's going to have that starting job, et cetera. I might be more interested in him there, especially if he goes much higher than Michael Pratt does, because, that tells us something. However, I wish I grabbed it. There's again, lying season, but there's a few teams apparently who have Pratt pretty high on their board, and he might be as high as like a second or third round pick, which, you and I are going to love because we'll be proven right. But we'll also hate because then people are going to want him more. So yeah. What exactly. Did you? So I thought Leggett at 208 was a reach, but I think I tend to be lower on Leggett than a lot of people. I have him as my wide receiver 15. Or no, 13, 14 maybe. I don't know. Anyway, he's in this kind of bunch of guys that are like, if they're used right, there is some ceiling there, but I have some doubts about their profile, and especially for him, the whole fifth year thing. In his defense, there are other factors. Entered school as a 190-pound quarterback, lost his parents, COVID, coaching changes, etc. So if you're gonna give a guy a break on a fifth-year breakout, it might be a guy like Leggett, but I just think he's limited relative to the type of wide receivers the NFL likes to use these days. So I tend to be lower on him than some others. What did you think of Leggett at 208?
Yeah, I just realized when you made a remark earlier, I didn't send you my points that I was going to make it who I was going to talk about, because I was going to talk about Consult Fantasy's team here in a little bit, and I was going to kind of touch on it then.
We'll save it. But we'll save it. We'll save it if you want.
Okay. Yeah. I'll bring that up later. I do agree with you though. Okay. Yeah, and also my bad for not sending you who I was going to talk about.
It's been a funky few days, my friend. It's been a funky few days.
My futon was in my over my desk, so I got thrown off there.
All right. So what is point number 3 for mock number 2?
All right. Let's just go ahead and talk about it, since I'll go ahead and do the worst draft. And I do want to preface this. I don't think anyone. Last mock we did, there are a few teams I just really didn't like their team. This was kind of hard for me to pick one that I liked the least, because I think everybody did a pretty good job of spreading out their draft. There were a few picks from each team maybe I didn't care for, but there was not just one team that I thought just dropped the ball. So I just want to start by saying that. But I will say I'm going to go with Consult Fantasy's team here. One reason is he did go all receivers. I think later rounds is a good chance to go and get a tight end or a running back. But I like Brian Thomas there, 108. I'm fine with that behind Bowers. But like you said, Leggett, I think that's a little bit of a reach. I might take a shot on him late third if some like Malik Washington and some of these other guys are gone. But I do think that's a little early. His comps kind of scare me, like based on his size, speed, and production. It's a bunch of guys like Mingo, Terrace Marshall. They look good. They're young still, but they're not rostered, not used at all. And then I'm kind of torn on Jacob Cowing. The smaller guys are growing on me, but I also see an outcome with him where he could just be like an Isaiah McKenzie type guy who just is a special teamer, comes in as a third or fourth wide receiver on an injury, might have a few good weeks. Kind of just downplaying. I heard that this morning on, I can't remember the show. It was Jeremy from the Pope FFH from FTN was on, and he brought that up. I was like, that's actually a really good comp right there. So I'll give him credit for that. I heard that from him this morning. But he does have some upside, and I think that type of player is kind of making a resurgence. But it's a little one pick before Malik Washington, and then Sanat, and then Devontae Walker. I'd rather have any of those guys over him. I think there's a lot higher floor for those guys than there is for Cowing. And Wilson there, it's a fine pick, but it's mainly the picks 2 and 3. And that just shows how I had to nitpick to find a bad team. I think everybody did pretty good in this draft, and it's not a bad draft, so I don't want to shit on them.
And Wilson, who's a guy that I'm kind of like, I don't want to say completely off of, but like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe he should play
A
tight
fifth
end.
round pick, maybe,
But
and
yeah,
that's fourth and fifth is not that big of a
yeah,
difference, but so that
yeah.
is nitpicking. But like I said, it's kind of hard to find a bunch of bad picks in this draft.
Cowing to his credit, especially before this previous season where he was outdone, overshadowed by Tet McMillan, who not many college wide receivers wouldn't be overshadowed by Tet McMillan. He produced pretty well at a big program. And I remember when I said I liked Malik Washington more than Jacob Cowing. Baller EK, he does Debbie Dose. He kind of he pushed back on that with good info that Malik really only did it 1 year in his 5th year. And so for me with Cowing, I agree that he's kind of in that the small guys that are doing better. I think him in particular, when I look at the talent level and everything there, I am saying he's more draft capital and landing spot dependent than say some of the smalls like Roman Wilson or Lad McConkey or Xavier Worthy, obviously, and that his ceiling may be that I shouldn't say ceiling, but is he ever going to be more than a wide receiver 3 on an NFL team? You know what I mean? Which is a fear I have for a player I love, Josh Downs. So which people have comped, Cowing to Downs, but I'm also a little interested in Taj Washington as far as smalls go. He just does a lot of things well, and I don't know. But anyway, that's a topic for another day, perhaps. So what is your 4th point on Mock 2.0?
All right. I'm going to go with best draft. And I had 2 on this one because I couldn't really decide between the 2. One of them is, let me find it, the 102 Graffiti. Obviously getting Caleb Williams at the 102 is nice. Lad McConkey, love Lad. If I'm at the 112 the 112 and I can't move the pick for what I want, I might just go ahead and take Lad there because I don't trust Mitchell. Don't want to take a running back, and I don't want Penix. That's if Worthy and Franklin are going like this is. I might go ahead and take Lad there just because I know there's at least a floor there, and I'm not going to have to worry about it. So I like those first 2 picks. Malachi Corley, I think him going ahead of Malik Washington is not great because I think Malik Washington is a better version of what people think they're getting from Malachi Corley. I think he got some comps to Debo Samuel, Yak King, and I just think Malik Washington's better at that. But I still like the pick there. 3rd round, I think he's a good player. Will Shipley, I think that's a pretty good value. I have him as a top 10 running back in the 4th round. Say what you will about him, and I don't know much about Johnson, but those 4 picks right there put him up, especially getting Caleb Williams at the 102.
Yeah, Dylan Johnson, the 5th is interesting. I think I have him lower than some other people, including our friend Kyle. But I also know that he's just solid. He's going to be a backup. I don't think he'll ever be more than that. But he's in the 5th round. You're going to get a guy who probably maybe 2 or 3 weeks, has to fill in for injury or something, and is going to pay off on a 5th rounder. Corley versus Washington, I have them like pretty much neck and neck. I think we had Brandon Lejeune on Dynasty Fever the other night, and he likes Corley better than Malik. Excuse me, I have it flipped, but his thing was that Corley, is first of all, I think a true junior or at least a 4th year player, not the 5th year player. Did it more years, more explosive, and has better size, right? Like Malik Washington is 5'9", and trust me, I love Malik. We were just talking about how much I like Malik as almost as much as Corley. But if you're gonna make the case, Malik is 5'9" and 5'9" and under. It's like, is he just gonna be another Rondell Moore? But I think I don't know that there should be a 7-pick gap, between them, so to speak, but. Either way, no matter who you like more more than the other one. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the other team I liked was Mike, Drop the Mike FF. I believe that's his Twitter handle. I could be wrong on that. He's a good friend of Going for Two, part of the Going for Two family. He took JJ McCarthy. I'm fine with taking him at the 108. Team dependent, I might take Worthy or Franklin, but if you need a quarterback, I think he's a pretty safe bet there. He looked good throwing at the combine. Marshawn Lloyd in the second round. He's one of the 3 running backs I'm willing to take in the second round, so I don't hate that pick there. I think he's going to be good. One of my favorite picks, Malik Washington. I think when it really comes down to it, and I'm actually drafting for my teams, I will be taking Malik Washington into the second round because there's kind of a dead zone there I'm going to talk about a little bit later. But I like the Malik Washington pick. And in the 4th round, taking a shot on Brendan Rice is worth it. Sure. I'm not a huge fan of him, but he's got some potential. His route running needs some work. But he's got strong hands, and he's a pretty physical receiver. So I could see at least some touchdown upside being there. So I like that pick in the 4th round too. And just touch on Kyle there. I'm fine. I like Jeff's draft too. I'm not a fan. I can't pronounce his name. Gorindo,
yeah.
Yeah, his game speed is not the same as his 40 speed. And that PFF podcast I talked about, Audric Estime clocked the same game speed as he did. So I think that's just more of like he's just better in the track environment. Yeah. I don't think that's going to translate as well. And I just don't really see a path to him in the NFL outside of maybe a 3rd down back. Watson is a good pick. I will say that. But
yeah, well, Kyle, listen, if
Braylon Allen, I think I'm completely off of Braylon Allen. He didn't test. I think he's going to be really slow, and people taking him over Estime. I just have, what does Braylon Allen do that Audric Estime cannot do? And some people have him as their RB1, top 5 RB. I don't see it, and I could be wrong about that, but I'm willing to die on that hill at this point.
Me too. Yeah, I love Matt Hicks. Like I've had him on my other show like 2 or 3 years in a row. He's got Braylon Allen as his 1, right? So like, I have him as my 8, and I'm almost like off of him pretty much at all, especially at cost. The argument for Allen is that, well, he came into college not as a running back. I think he was either an edge or athlete designation, and they just had this like young freak, and they were like, let's put you at running back. And so he's still learning the position, and then he can grow because he's only age 20 and that sort of thing. Hey, Cody Schrader got picked.
I'll pick here if I can talk about it.
And so, what was I saying? Who was I talking about? Braylon Allen. Yeah. So,
my ADHD just kicked in there. I forgot to.
Yeah. But and Lejeune fired back and said, well, he may be 20, but he's been playing for 3 years in college, right? And he is what he is now after 3 years. So you compare him to other 3-year players, and he has a way of, Jesse calls it looks like Tarzan plays like Jane, where he just does not like contact in the second level. Blake Watson, for those folks who don't know who he is, productive wide receiver at Memphis. Kyle will rip those stats in the chat, I'm sure. Very much, I think, has a future as mainly a backup and pass catcher. I left Kyle's message up to remind me, Kyle, if you took Blake Watson way ahead of where he should go, I would have had the same intro to this show where I was talking about handling anger for ruining my mock draft. All right.
That's funny.
All right. And so do you want to talk about Theo? Do you want to talk about your 5th point? Where do you want to go with this?
Yeah, so if I'm being honest, I think I have the best draft here. Nope, I'm just kidding. That is my bias, but I do think I almost took Theo Johnson in the 4th round. And the reason I didn't is because the mocks I've done lately, a lot of them have been with the JWB guys, and they're not in it. It's just ones that their Discord puts on. They put them out all day. So I joined a bunch just so I can kind of see what's going on. Theo Johnson isn't even getting drafted, and I have him and Sanat right at 2-3. And so the fact that I didn't pick him in the 4th round just because I wanted to see if I could get him in the 5th round. And I really like Kamani Vidal. You turned me on to him a little bit. I looked at some tape, and some of the guys from the Undroppables are really high on him too. So I figured I'd go there, get another running back with Estime, and hope Theo Johnson was there. And I got him in the 5th round. So as Kyle said, he's my tight end too in the 5th round. I'll take that all day. And that might be one of my better value picks too.
Yeah. Yeah, I was very mad when you took Vidal, right? Like because I
I
mean,
Yeah, I knew you would.
it's only a mock, right? Like who the hell cares, right? Like I'm not actually like acquiring these players and using them or whatever, but you know, you're in the mock and you're like, I want to get my guy in the 4th round. But you know, I got our guy. I got Pratt, so
Yeah. Yep.
I was okay. I was okay with that. Um yeah. Theo, as Kyle pointed out, does have Canadian roots. I think another reason to to maybe think about his arc being different than some people might tell you, just because football is just the way that they come up through the programs and stuff in Canada, which Kyle can speak to better probably, just is different, right? And there's another player in this draft, I forget, where he went to high school in Canada and just is kind of like behind because he's in the the Canadian football culture where it's just a little less intense with fewer like boot camps and stuff than American. So it's something to keep in mind about his development. I've soured a little bit on Theo. I think he's riding that 9.99 RAS a little much. I don't know, but we'll see. But yeah, we were talking
Well,
about Blake Watson too. That's a pretty good value pick. Dylan Laube in the 5th. He's going to probably catch some passes. Why not take a shot on him there as well? I love Ray and Isaiah Davis. In the 4th. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what I like about Theo is he's 260 pounds or was and ran a 4.5, and his first 10 yards were rivaled some of that of some receivers and running backs. So I think he's got explosion to get off the line and get open. But I don't think it's going to be a first year you're going to see results because tight ends do sometimes take some time to mature. Look at Michael Mayer, even Trey McBride. Not everyone's going to be Sam Laporta and Kyle Pitts get 1,000 yards. Yeah. So I do think, but in the 5th round, I'm okay with them sitting there for a year or two, maybe plugging them in and playing if there's an injury. But
yeah. I mean, I think when you take a 5th round cost into then for sure it sounds a lot different. All right,
All right. I think we're on my last one, and this last one, I'm going to talk about 2 things. I'm going to start with the first one quick. I'm trading out of the middle of the 2nd round. If I got like a 205 or 204 to 2.209, I'm going to try and trade back. I don't really like many of the people there, and I feel like I'm reaching on people. I don't really want to take a running back there. I think it's a little early for Pearsall. I prefer Pearsall towards the end of the 2nd. So just one thing I've noticed, if I'm in the middle of the 2nd, I'm probably going to try and trade back, maybe pick up a couple of 3rds or 4ths and stack up on some of those guys. And the other one is I don't think it's really that close between Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors. And here's why. And the one position
How dare you slander the 101 of Dynasty?
And in the past, my best hits have been with wide receivers, so I trust myself evaluating them more than some of the other positions. But I also have a prescription to reception perception by Matt Harmon. It pays off. He knows what he's talking about. He sits here and watches all these routes. And once I saw both Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison's reception perception pages, it completely just confirmed that they're not even in the same tier. And here's why. The percentiles of success rate against man, zone, and press for Marvin Harrison, man's 83rd, zone's 80th, press is 87th percentile, which is borderline elite. Malik Neighbors only had a success rate against zone in the 46th percentile. And that's kind of a red flag to me because the top receiver, I need them to be able to get open on every play. Puka knows the spots in the zone.
NFL plays 70% zone these days, so.
And the fact that he's so weak against the zone was in college is kind of concerning to me. But the main reason that confirmed it is, let me find this paragraph. I had it highlighted and then I clicked on it.
While you're grabbing that, also is worth mentioning, like with the offense with LSU, I mean, it was high octane and Jaden Daniels was extending plays. It was basically goes and hitches and Malik Neighbors on slot fades. Like take out Malik Neighbors reps on slot fades and see what happens. He's dynamic and explosive, and I think that makes him that raises his stock in today's NFL and would be the wide receiver one in just about almost any wide receiver class. I personally think it's a little closer than you do, but I personally think that it's clear, if not, I'm not going to say it's not close, but like, one of those, like for me, and it's not close, right? But I do think it's clear. Like for me, Marvin is the clear wide receiver one over Neighbors as the two. But they're in the same tier for me. It's like 1A and 1B. So yeah.
And the other main point is he notes on here that Marvin Harrison had faced double coverage 17% of the time, which is the highest he's ever charted for a prospect. And obviously didn't bother his production, but no other receiver has been doubled more than 8% of their routes in the reception perception database. So I think the fact that they just zoned in on him and he still got 1,200 yards and 14 touchdowns or 1,100 plus, I think that just shows he's a true ex-alpha receiver, but his route running is good enough to where he can play any part in the field. And just because he didn't at Ohio State doesn't mean he can't in the NFL, because he's successful on almost all his routes. As you saw, 80th percentile against zone, man, and press. And a little context is necessary because let me look up who their quarterback was. Kyle
McCord versus Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, and that's necessary. Kyle McCord's probably a good college quarterback, but it's different. He didn't have good quarterback play, and he was still able to produce while being double coverage almost 20% of the time.
Well, to be fair also, though, that's 2023. I think before that there was Stroud, so yeah.
But his numbers were the same this year as they were the year before, and he faced more double coverage. So I think he's the true wide receiver one. I don't blame anyone for thinking otherwise, really, because Malik Neighbors is elite. I think he's in a tier of his own before Odunze, but I still think Marvin Harrison's him or Caleb Williams should be the 101 or 102.
I wanted to ask you, so one thing that I wanted to do for this episode, and we're going to be landing the plane soon for those of you watching, was I wanted to go through ADP and mock draft database and come up with a question for you about, X wide receiver with this draft capital in this landing spot versus X running back with this draft capital in this landing spot. Because what we're seeing in mocks is that people are almost feel the need, because it's kind of like I'm saying it's not like a good pick, but we're seeing running backs go in the second and some pretty good wide receivers in a deep class being pushed down to the third, which kind of speaks to I might as well go for third round picks because I don't want to be in the mid second. So, I think it's fair to ask, is an early third, gonna have, or early to mid third, gonna have some value for a wide receiver that we trust more than some of the running backs? Now, that question matters more on April 6th when we don't have draft capital and landing spot, because some of these running backs being taken in the second may not be there, and that they may be in the third and fourth if they get bad draft capital and landing spots. So this isn't an exercise in, knowing that information. But what we know now, I may want Javon Baker or Jalen Polk or Malik Washington, above
McMillan too.
Above like a Marshawn Lloyd or a Benson. By the way, I want to shout out Jalen Wright at the 212 as well as a good value. I love him. So
he's my running back too.
So similar draft capital, similar landing spot as far as how good you think it is for opportunity and that sort of thing. Do you want Javon Baker and Jermaine Burton, or do you want Trey Benson and Marshawn Lloyd? Right? Like, I think it's a fair question.
Yeah, I think that's just team dependent. A lot of my teams I have a lot of running backs because I ate up the value of people just completely shitting on them and forgetting about them. So it really depends on team value. But I do lean in Dynasty towards the wide receivers, just the way the NFL is handling running backs now. So I might lean on trading back and, like Jamie said in the chat, try and get a young wide receiver who thrown on top that I can just take a shot on that I don't need if he doesn't work out.
All right. Yeah, so let's take Jamie's question then before we wrap things up. I hate Jalen Hyatt, so like my first reaction was like, no, right? But in the context of the conversation we just had, you're moving down 7 picks and taking a swing on a high variance player, on top in a draft that we think there may not be a big difference between the 206 and the 301. And in fact, you may want the wide receiver who's there at the 301 above the running back that you're going to get at the 206. So what would you do with this trade?
I would probably do it because I don't hate Jalen Hyatt, but I also saw some flashes last year for being on a terrible Giants passing offense. I think there is a chance to be like a Gabe Davis type. And as much as I kind of just shit on Gabe Davis, there is still some fantasy like value there. And I think it's worth 7 picks in the rookie draft. Because I've even seen Pearsall in some drafts I do fall to the 3rd round. So if I could go down and get Pearsall at 301 and Hyatt for that, I'll probably take that chance.
All right. Would you replace Hyatt in that trade with QJ? I have QJ over Hyatt.
Yeah, I do too.
As much as QJ was a bust, still he's only in his 2nd year, 1st round draft capital. A team that, as of now, doesn't have much at the position and will need some development. One of the criticisms that folks like me had of QJ last year was he's not good at cost because he's going to take some time to develop because he's kind of raw. Who knows? Maybe they move him into big slot or something like that and figure out a better way to use him. I think he's more suited for something like big slot than he is for being a true outside guy. But to answer your question, Jamie, both of us would rather have QJ over Hyatt.
So real quick, I know we're about to stop, but I made a trade today, and I don't really make trades at this time of the year because there's so much going on. I made it with actually Timmy, aka Nubs, that we had on a week or 2 ago. And so a little context. This is a team where I have Lamar, I have CJ Stroud, and I have Kyler Murray. Kind of an aging team where I got like Tyreek, Calvin Ridley, Ramondre. I just needed I felt like I could have traded one of those quarterbacks. So I traded away Kyler Murray and this year's 208, which is a spot I'm kind of trying to get out of. And in return for Kyler and the 208, I got Achane, Tank Dell, Aaron Rodgers, and the 306. Personal opinions on Aaron Rodgers out of the way. He will be my 3rd quarterback, kind of as a backup plan. And the 306. So we swapped the 306 and 208, where I'm probably going to take Audric Estime.
So Kyler and the 2 for Rodgers, Tank Dell, the
Achane.
3, and Achane.
In a team where I need running backs and wide receivers that are younger. So, I have Lamar and CJ Stroud too.
Personally, like I see the high level quarterback and the liquidity of the higher draft capital, and I want to lean that side. But I think if you look at your team situation and look at it from that perspective, not in a vacuum, and you think about the sum of those parts together, what they can do for you, especially if Rodgers is just your quarterback 3, then yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah,
I saw it as saving me from having to tear down the whole team and annoy people with my trade offers for another few years where I can maybe compete. Because I'm trying to win now in that league. I finished, I think, 4th last year, so just out of the money. So I'm happy with it. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I like it. All right, folks, that'll do it for this episode of Dynasty Saturday Night 5. Hopefully, we haven't been canceled and we'll be on next week.
We'll just start a new one.
Yeah, sure. We're not, right? I got a StreamYard account. Fuck this restream shit. All right. So please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. Going for 2 live audio feed, podcast feed. Please make sure you subscribe, like, comment, notifications here on the YouTubes and elsewhere. Feed that algorithm monster what it must be fed. I really do appreciate folks staying on and working through what we had to say at the beginning, especially if you didn't know it was coming and you tuned in and you're like, what is this? Right. So Really, really do appreciate that. Time for plugs. Josh, where can we find you and your work?
All right, you can find me on Twitter at Rotonaut, Rotonaut. You can find my rookie and dynasty rankings on goingfor2.com. I think that's about it. Yeah, I'm trying to tweet more, but it's really hard for me just to put my thoughts onto Twitter. It's easier for me just to mindlessly scroll. So I'm trying to do that more, especially when it comes to fantasy football, because I see things happen. I'm like, I thought this would happen, and then I just never posted it. So I want to help people, especially if I'm plugging my Twitter. So I'm going to try and share my thoughts on that a little bit more, but I'm pretty bad at using Twitter.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up Twitter, because honestly, some of the stuff I was talking about before goes into the Twitter sphere as well, right? Like I'm like carrying the flag for like being nice to each other on Twitter, and like I don't know, like it ends up people misunderstand me and like whatever, and sometimes get attacked for it and that sort of thing. But my whole thing is like, don't be just dismissive, like just don't be snarky, whatever. Like just tell me why you disagree with that person.
Yeah.
Don't just say they're a bozo. Like, tell me why. Like, have a conversation. I'm not saying a long dissertation and an essay, but for crying out loud, you can find me on Twitter at ffjunkie_, and pinned to the top of my profile is a document that I made that explains some of the stuff that goes into my form of neurodivergence, having both autism and ADHD here for Autism Acceptance Month. So, it gives you links to things that you can learn about stuff like, rejection sensitivity dysphoria and justice sensitivity and stuff like that. So, if you're curious, check it out. It's essentially in the form of an apology for folks that I've had prickly interactions with in Sleeper and stuff that I'm trying to get better at. But yeah, it has some good stuff there. So go to the tweet that's pinned on my profile. Rankings and articles, of course, on goingfor2.com, which you should all check out. There's a link to the Discord there. Bottom right, there's the purple thingy that'll get you to the free Discord, hella channels, and really no negativity, which is awesome. Free. People are talking about all sorts of things, every format, trades, and all that. I have a midweek audio only podcast called Dynasty Fever that you can find on Twitter at Dynasty Fever Pod. I pretty much just only tweet out when there's a new episode. We just had Brendan Lejeune on earlier this week to talk about rookies. So go check that out. Yeah,
it's also that Discord's really popping during Scott Fishbowl. So if you want to try to get in, do it. I'm hoping I can go to the DC live draft instead of Atlanta this year. Meet up with boss man Jeff, ask him where my check is. So, but yeah, our Discord's very popping for Scott Fishbowl. A lot of good resources, a lot of smart people.
All right, sounds awesome. So I guess that'll just about do it for us tonight. My brain is I just got, I don't know, adrenaline and confusion and all sorts of. It's mush right now.
This is not to compare the two, but like after you sit there and like talk about stuff like that, it's exhausting. Like after my therapy sessions, I usually just go home and I don't do anything the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Not saying that these are the same things, but anytime you got to be vulnerable and talk about stuff like that, it's taxing and it's kind of exhausting. So yeah, take care of yourself for sure.
All right, folks. All that jazz. Thanks. It's a wrap. Thanks for viewing. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And
go Braves. Go Irish. Aldrich SMA RB1.